hollow echo of empty men surrounds us. Look around, you'll see them everywhere. Drifting shadows, moved by every wind, shaped by every hand but their own. These are men who stand for nothing, and so they fall. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, invisibly, until one day they look in the mirror and recognize nothing of value staring back. This isn't just another motivational speech. This is a brutal awakening, a slap across the face when you're drowning in the comfort of your own mediocrity. When you stand for nothing, you become nothing, a vessel waiting to be filled by someone else's purpose, someone else's vision, someone else's dream. Is that what you were forged for? To be the empty container of another man's courage? The ancient warriors understood something we've forgotten. They knew that a man without conviction isn't just useless, he's dangerous. Dangerous to himself, dangerous to his tribe, dangerous to everything that matters. Because when the storm comes, and the storm always comes, she's the first to break, the first to run, the first to surrender what should never be surrendered. Your ancestors didn't just survive famine, war, plague, and unimaginable hardships so you could become a spectator in your own existence. They fought through hell itself, their blood soaking into the very ground you now walk upon with such casual indifference. They stood, they held their ground when every fiber of their being screamed to retreat. What do you stand for? If the answer doesn't come immediately, violently, undeniably to your mind, then you're already falling, already losing ground you might never reclaim. Here's the savage truth most won't tell you. The world breaks men who stand for nothing, not out of malice, but out of natural law. The same law that pulls the weak gazelle from the herd. The same law that causes a house built on sand to collapse when the tide rises. Standing for something isn't a philosophical luxury. It's the bedrock foundation that determines whether you'll remain standing when everything around you crumbles. And make no mistake, the crumbling will come. The question isn't if, but when. I've watched men shatter when they lose their job, their wealth, their woman, their status. Why? Because they stood for none of these things. They merely leaned on them, used them as crutches to avoid the harder work of finding their immovable center. When the props were kicked away, they had nothing left inside to keep them upright. A man who stands for something has carved his purpose into the marrow of his bones. It can't be taken from him. It can't be burned away. It can't be drowned. It remains when everything else is stripped bare. The weak say, I'll find what I stand for tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next year. And suddenly they're staring at the twilight of their existence with the hollow ache of a life unlived, values undecided, ground never defended. The warrior understands there is no tomorrow in this quest. The time to plant your feet is now. The time to draw your line is now. The time to decide what hill you're willing to die on is now. But here's what they won't tell you about standing for something. It hurts. It burns. It costs. When you drive a stake into the ground and declare, this is mine, this is what I believe, this is where I stand, you have just painted a target on your chest. You have just invited opposition. You have just separated yourself from the comfortable herd of men who stand for nothing. And that's precisely why most won't do it. Comfort is the silent killer of greatness, the warm blanket that suffocates potential, the soft poison that paralyzes strength before it can develop. Most men will choose comfort over conviction every single time. They'll nod along with whatever opinion seems safest. They'll bend whichever way the cultural wind blows. They'll sacrifice their deepest values for a moment of approval, a fleeting sense of belonging. These men exist, but do not truly live. They respire, but do not inspire. They occupy space, but leave no mark upon it. And when they're gone, the world continues unaltered, unaffected, unaware that they ever drew breath at all. Is that what you want? To pass through this crucible of existence like a ghost? To stand before whatever judgment awaits us all and have nothing to show for your time but careful avoidance of conflict? To have felt nothing deeply enough that you would risk everything to defend it? The path of standing for something is harder, steeper, lonelier. It will cost you fair weather friends. It will cost you easy opportunities. It will cost you peaceful nights when you could have simply gone along to get along. But what it gives in return is beyond price. It gives you an unshakable core that no external force can break. It gives you the quiet power that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you'll fight for. It gives you the ability to weather storms that shatter other men. Look at every great figure who altered the course of history, who left an indelible mark on the tapestry of human experience. Every single one stood for something so powerfully that they were willing to be crushed by the weight of that stand, rather than step aside. They understood what comfort seekers never will, that some things are worth suffering for, some principles are worth bleeding for, some values are worth dying for. Because without these things, what remains? A mere biological existence, the mechanical process of drawing breath until you no longer can. Is that enough for you? To simply persist until you expire? The universe doesn't create men capable of greatness just to have them squander it on careful neutrality. The fire in your blood wasn't ignited so you could spend your days ensuring it never burns too brightly, never consumes too much fuel, never risks setting ablaze what needs to burn. Your convictions are the bedrock upon which everything else in your existence is built. Your career, your relationships, your legacy. Without this foundation, you're building on shifting sand, constructing a life that will collapse at the first serious test. I've seen hollow men break under pressures that the conviction-driven absorb without flinching. I've watched empty men sell their birthright for temporary relief, while those who stand for something endure the unendurable because they're anchored to something greater than momentary comfort. Here's the iron truth. When you stand for nothing, anything can move you. Any force, any influence, any temporary discomfort can push you off your path because you never had a path to begin with. You were just wandering, calling it freedom, when it was actually the most insidious form of imprisonment, the jail cell you never recognized, because you built it yourself. The man who stands for something has constraints. Yes, he has drawn lines he will not cross. He has set standards he will not compromise. And within these boundaries he finds not limitation but true liberation. The freedom that comes from knowing exactly who you are, what you believe, and what you'll defend to your last breath. This isn't about rigidity. The oak that cannot bend breaks in the storm. This is about having a core so solid, so uncompromising, that you can flex and adapt at the edges without ever losing your center. You can change tactics without changing values. You can grow and evolve without becoming untethered from your deepest convictions. Most will never understand this. They'll see your stand as stubbornness, your conviction as close-mindedness, your unwavering values as lack of growth. Let them. The validation of those who stand for nothing means nothing. So I ask you again, what do you stand for? If your answer is still forming, still uncertain, still negotiable, then this is your wake-up call. This is your moment to drive your stake into the ground. This is your opportunity to declare yourself before another day passes in the fog of indecision. Because here's the brutal reality. They won't tell you in comfortable motivational seminars. The world is not neutral. It doesn't maintain what you don't actively defend. It doesn't preserve what you don't fiercely protect. The default isn't stasis, it's entropy, it's decay, it's loss. Everything you value, everything you care about, everything you hope to build or protect or nurture will be tested, will be challenged, will face forces of destruction both subtle and overt. And in that moment, your stand will be all that separates preservation from ruin. The man who stands for nothing has already surrendered before the battle begins. He's already lost what he never decided was worth fighting for. He's already broken before the pressure mounts. But you can be different. You can be the immovable object in a world of unstoppable forces. You can be the lighthouse that doesn't flicker when the storm rages. You can be the mountain that doesn't crumble when the earth shakes. Not because you're special, not because you're chosen, but because you've done what most refuse to do. You've decided, you've committed, you've driven your sword into the ground and declared, here I stand, here I fight, here if necessary I fall, but I will not be moved. This decision changes everything. It transforms how you walk, how you speak, how you think, how you face adversity. It radiates from you without a word being spoken. Others feel it, some fear it. Some are drawn to it, but none can ignore it. The world respects what it cannot easily move. It ultimately bows to what it cannot break. And a man who truly stands for something becomes exactly that, unbreakable. Not because he feels no pain, but because his purpose runs deeper than his pain. Not because he faces no opposition, but because his conviction burns hotter than the fires meant to consume it. So stand, plant your feet, declare your ground, defend your values, protect what matters, fight for what you love, die for what you believe. Because a man who stands for nothing falls for everything. But a man who stands with unshakable conviction cannot truly fall in defeat, even in death. He remains standing in the ways that matter most. The choice is yours. The time is now. The stand is everything.